Hello, everyone. Welcome to GRID Live Wrap-Up. Joe Sammy here along with Ben Schneider, Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish, and Amanda Kaufman. We got NASCAR, we have Formula One, the GRID Ranking week number 6. All that right here, and of course we encourage everyone to participate in the chat room. We'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on everything, especially the Ross Chastain and Gregson issue after the race. Big thank you to our Patreon subscribers, calling the show, Mark and Robin, and David, the newest one in our Patreon investors, for investing in the GRID Network, helping us pay the bills. And of course, if you want to do a one-time contribution or multiple contributions at your own pace, buy me a coffee. Both links in the video description, and of course, in the video description link, full recap of the Formula E Monaco E-Prix from yesterday with Edward Hunter from Formula E Zone. Kobe, what a weekend of racing. It all started with Monaco, but then, of course, Formula One, which will be going to Monaco shortly, they put on quite a show today.
Yeah, we saw some interesting racing throughout the field today in Miami, but Max Verstappen was the man on a mission in Miami, starting the race on hard tires. He made an impressive overtake on Charles Leclerc and Kevin Magnussen 3 wide down the front stretch. Fastest lap of the race by lap 6. Second place by lap 15, and he took the lead on lap 21. Verstappen did over 40 laps on the hard tires and made quick work of Sergio Perez for the lead. It was a Red Bull 1-2 finish, and once again, nobody had anything for him. And starting with you, Amanda, do you believe the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship is game over for the rest of the grid? That is just going to be between Max and Checo, and does Red Bull, just basically already have this in the bag?
I think it's certainly going to be very difficult on the driver's side of things to catch Max and Checo. It seems like they're sort of pulling ahead with this, but I think that there maybe is a little bit of hope there for some of the updates that teams bring, especially a team like Aston. If they have any upgrades coming, that they could potentially if they're able to challenge for wins, then they'll be able to stay and keep their drivers in the drivers' championship. But it does very much look like, what is that, 100-point swing in terms of the constructors. Going to be very difficult for teams to overcome.
Yeah, the constructors is over. You can see there on the screen, 224 to, if I do the math quickly, 102, I guess, for Aston Martin. So, we talk all the time about upgrades that teams are going to bring, and maybe that helps them unlock a little bit of pace, especially if it's a midfield team that, can maybe elevate them 1 or 2 spots in the constructors. But in terms of fighting Red Bull this year, forget it. This championship battle is theirs on the constructor side of things, and it's going to be theirs on the driver's side of things as well. It's just going to be a matter of, is it Max Verstappen or is it Sergio Perez? I think Max is clearly in the driver's seat. I think he should absolutely be considered the favorite. But then again, all it's going to take is one retirement. If Checo goes out and wins Imola and has the fastest lap, he's got roughly the same amount of a lead that Max has right now. So I think it's way too early to crown Max the champion-elect. I think he should certainly be the favorite. He's certainly my pick to become a triple world champion this year. But at the same time, I think the constructors is far out of reach. And I think Red Bull, you might as well start engraving the trophy now. They're going to add another constructors championship to their storied history in Formula One.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you. I think the constructors is definitely a game over. Even with a slight upgrade, I don't see any of the other constructors being able to challenge Red Bull because they've just been super, super dominant. And just one small upgrade is not going to make a difference at all. It would be great if we get a epic championship battle throughout the rest of the season between Verstappen and Perez. I know nothing is going to beat the epic year we had in 2021, but it would be awesome to see a pair of teammates going at it, Verstappen versus Perez, and we'll see what continues to happen throughout the course of the 2023 Formula One season. While Verstappen was climbing up position after position, Charles Leclerc and Ferrari couldn't do anything. Leclerc was unable to find a way around Kevin Magnussen's Haas for the first 38 laps. Halfway through the race, he was 6 positions down. He started 7th and finished 7th, but Leclerc had 2 crashes this week at the same corner. Ben, do you believe those incidents hurt Leclerc's confidence in the race, and was he a bit conservative today, focusing on salvaging some points?
I don't know. It's tough to say whether he's too conservative or not, because I think right there you see on the screen 5th and 7th. I think that's about where Ferrari are right now in terms of their pace. So, he finished right where I would have expected him to based on what they've shown us the start of this season. You can see he's 7th in points right now as well. Leclerc is. So, I think it certainly had to it couldn't have helped his confidence, I'll put it that way. But at the same time, you know, in an alternate world where he doesn't have those incidents, I think, you know, maybe you can give him 1 or 2 more spots, maybe be up there with Carlos battling for a top 5. But, you know, I think Ferrari are going to be racing for 4th place, you know, for the foreseeable future, to be quite honest. I think the 2nd place battle is shaping up to be between Aston Martin and the team that supply their power units in Mercedes. I think they're a little bit ahead of Ferrari right now. Now, this could be a case where the upgrades maybe do make a difference. If Ferrari can get an upgrade soon enough, maybe they close the gap and make it an interesting battle for 2nd place. But at the moment, I think that's right where we'd expect Ferrari to be finishing, somewhere in that 5th to 7th place range with each of their drivers.
Yeah, I have to agree that I didn't expect to see much more out of them today, especially after Leclerc's 2 crashes in practice and qualifying. I think that it obviously hurt his confidence somewhat, and if it made sense for him to drive a safe race and collect some of the points that he was missing out on in the first couple of races of the season. And I think that that's kind of Ferrari's MO moving forward, is to just kind of, even Carlos Sainz was saying that 3rd was the best that they could have hoped for today in terms of qualifying. So I think that, like Ben said, Ferrari is sort of on the back foot, and that's all we could have really expected out of them today.
Yeah, for sure. And for Charles Leclerc, it really seems like, you know, frustration is really starting to boil over at Ferrari, because we all know what Charles Leclerc is capable of, that if you give him the car, he could be right up there battling Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez for the championship. But unfortunately, things have not been going right for Ferrari now for the longest time. And as we've been saying on our previous shows, that at some point, Charles Leclerc is going to have to look in the mirror and figure out, what does he want to do in the future? Does he want to hope that Ferrari is able to give him a car that can go battle for a world championship in the future? Or is grass greener on the other side on a car that can get him that sooner rather than later? And these 2 crashes that we saw this weekend, as Ben said, you know, it certainly didn't help his case at all, because it's been a real frustrating time for Charles Leclerc and his teammate Carlos Sainz. He got a pit road speeding penalty, and Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin was quicker and got by the fading Sainz to get the final spot on the podium. Amanda, would Imola, the next race on the schedule, would that be a good rebound track for Ferrari? You know, being in Italy, that's one race that Ferrari really, really would like to show a stronger form.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd want to do well, perform well in front of the Scuderia in their home, in a home race of sorts. But I think that a race that's coming up that I think Ferrari really has the best chance of maybe even pulling off a win at would be a race like Monaco, where it's traditionally extremely hard to pass and to overtake on, and where qualifying really is everything, because it seems like Ferrari can sometimes pull the qualifying pace out of the bag, but when it comes to race pace, it's not there. So I think with the aid of close walls and a track that's hard to pass, I think that could be a better opportunity for them, whereas Imola, I don't really know that they'll have much to bring in terms of beating Red Bull or finishing ahead of Mercedes or even Aston.
Yeah, I can't expect much from Ferrari here at Imola. I know they'd love to do well, because like you're mentioning, Kobe, I guess it's one of their home races now. I know people really associate Monza with being Ferrari's home race with the Tifosi and everything, but it is in Italy, so I'm sure that they would love to have a good race and put on a good show and maybe even pick up a win. But I think that's probably wishful thinking at this point. Like we were saying, Red Bull's been so dominant. I think we're going to pick them to win every race until further notice this season. So I don't know. I agree with Amanda. I think Monaco could be an interesting case if they somehow go out and show single lap pace and get the pole, which Leclerc's had a couple of opportunities to do that this year, if we're being honest. But I think that's more likely than, you know, the next race here in Imola. I think, you know, Ferrari, it's going to take them a couple races to unlock that speed, because we just haven't seen it recently.
Yeah, before we move on, have a comment in the chat room from Adam Limmer. Says starting 9th in Miami didn't phase Max Day. He's incredible. Yeah, definitely. He says Red Bull versus the Phil in F1. the rest of the year is Verstappen versus Perez in Class A, and then everybody else is going to be battling for third, because there's nobody that's going to be catching those Red Bulls. And I totally agree with what you were saying, Ben. I think the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, that for Ferrari, if they want to go out there and try to show a stronger form, is really wishful thinking, because the car just doesn't have the pace right now. So the best thing that they're gonna have to do is just go out there and just do what they've been doing, to try to finish fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, wherever in that range. They continue building points. I don't see them being that competitive next time out, just around where we've seen them so far this season. And one team that had an uneventful weekend was McLaren, as they scored no points. While most people have discussed Charles Leclerc possibly leaving Ferrari in the future, what about Lando? Norris has been with McLaren since 2019. McLaren was moving up the grid, but fell behind Alpine last year. Now they're fifth in the constructors and well behind the top four. Alpine got a double points finish today. Could Lando Norris be another driver looking to move over to a more competitive seat?
Yeah, well, Kobe, I'm glad you brought the points back up, because, McLaren are in fifth, and on paper, if that's all you know, then you think, that's right where we would expect them to be, closer to the top of the midfield here. But when you look at the points differential, Williams is a shock podium away from overtaking them. It's that they're not that far ahead of really, with no offense to Williams or AlphaTauri, the back markers of the sport right now. So they got a lot of work to do. They're certainly nowhere near the pace they were at even a couple years ago, when they got that epic 1-2 finish in Monza, with Daniel Ricciardo winning and Norris coming home in second. And then Lando Norris, if it hadn't rained that day, probably would have hung on to win the Russian Grand Prix that year. So, they have been at the front of the pack in the not too distant past here, competing for wins and podiums. It's unfortunate to see how far they've fallen. They haven't fallen completely all the way back down the grid like they were in 2015 and 2017 with Fernando Alonso and the Honda partnership that ended poorly. But, I think if McLaren don't turn this around soon, you got to think Lando's getting a little bit impatient. And if the seat opens up at Mercedes or Red Bull in the near future, heck, even Aston Martin with how they're running right now, Fernando Alonso is having this amazing career renaissance, but he is in his early 40s. So you got to think he doesn't have too many years left. Maybe in a couple of years, if Aston Martin can keep this up, that might be somewhere that Lando looks at as a potential future destination.
Yeah, you mentioned it right there, Ben. I think the question is, where would Lando go in the near future? It doesn't seem like there are any spots for him to take. Like, Fernando seems to be loving the game right now and really enjoying the drive. I'm sure he doesn't have that many more years in him, but same thing with Lewis. Maybe not loving where Mercedes is at right now, but still in every interview seems to be determined and looking to stay with the team, chasing the eighth. And then I think that when you look at other drivers like George Russell, like Carlos Sainz, like Charles Leclerc, they're driving well enough that the teams aren't going to want to let them go. So I think that Lando's a little bit stuck. Maybe Alpine, but it doesn't seem like they're consistent enough to be a worthwhile switch for him. So I think that Lando's kind of stuck where he is for the near future, but I can tell he's definitely frustrated with where the team is at.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely seems like Lando doesn't really have a potential landing spot right now in the short term, but who knows what could happen more long term. As silly season, we've seen some of the wildest things happen. There could certainly be some more competitive seats open up in the future. Now, looking at Lewis Hamilton, we don't know how much longer he's going to be around at Mercedes. He will be one of the most coveted on the grid. And I read an article on motorsports.com talking about how Mercedes would consider Leclerc more long-term in the future. So, and when you have drivers like Leclerc and Norris, they're certainly going to get a lot of attention from a team like Mercedes if they lose Lewis Hamilton within the next few years or so. So potentially, who knows what could happen there? And looking at teams on the other side of Mercedes in the constructor standings, that's certainly not a place where Lando would probably want to go right now, especially if those teams are not going to be on the upswing. And just to bring it all in, looking at the entire weekend as a whole, the second Miami Grand Prix had a sellout crowd. If the red flag did not come out at the end of Q3, Verstappen could have dominated the race from flag to flag, but he really had to work for it from ninth on the grid, as Adam mentioned in the chat. Quite an impressive drive from Max. I even told him that on the radio. So, Ben, how would you rate this year's Miami Grand Prix compared to last year?
I hate to say it being here in the States, but it kind of feels like Monaco to me. It's all about the spectacle, but the on-track product, isn't all that great. Now, granted, we did see some overtakes, and Max Verstappen did have to work for it coming from ninth on the grid. But, I tweeted this as soon as the NASCAR race was over. This was the first weekend, for me in a while where I feel like I can comprehensively say there is no argument in terms of which series going head-to-head this week won the entertainment and on-track product battle this weekend, and that would be NASCAR Kansas Speedway. And I know we'll talk about that race here coming up in just a moment. But, I've got to say, Miami to me, I know that they do it up real big down there, and they put on a great show. And I'm sure that the spectacle is fantastic. The atmosphere has to be great for the fans who are fortunate enough to be able to afford to attend the race and afford the concessions and, the food prices and all that. And that's a whole discussion that we can get into another time as well. But in terms of the actual on-track products, I think the Miami Grand Prix, 2 years in, I think it leaves a lot to be desired, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I have to agree, Ben, with everything you just said. I think that Miami is great for exposure. I think that it does a great thing for the U.S. market in terms of getting buy-in from those who maybe aren't watching every other race or have. I know several friends who wouldn't even have known what Formula One was if Formula One didn't race in Miami. So I think that, and we've got a comment that says F1 needs a lot of help with their on-track products so far. They're getting leaped by every series right now. And I have to agree with what Ben said in terms of NASCAR being the more exciting race this weekend today, for me at least. So yeah, I think that in terms of last year, not much difference, but it was exciting to see some people starting out of position and having Max work for his drive to the front and the slight battle he had with Checo up front, and then seeing a few unexpected points finishes like from the Haas.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I think both of you put it best. It's more so the atmosphere of the Miami Grand Prix, which gets us all excited about this race. But overall, the on-track product, not a lot to be desired. They're unfortunately, but Miami market is really important. Formula One's done an excellent job with its marketing, and I forgot who said this on Twitter. Rolling through today, they were talking about the Sky Sports broadcast. They've been like, those broadcasters make the race so exciting. They could even like make paint drawing on wall, get us all excited and hyped up for the race. So they have a great presentation with the broadcast, great marketing. Business is booming in Formula One right now. So I think F1 certainly has to be happy with how the Miami Grand Prix went this year from that perspective. But as Alex Fleener was saying down in the chat, they really need to continue to try to make some gains with the on-track product. I think in 2021, that great year we all continue to talk about, they made some great gains there, and then last year started to take a step back, and once again this year it started to take an even giant, a bigger step back in that case. So hopefully, as we get into 2024 next year, that'll try to make some changes so we can have a more competitive on-track product.
Yeah, hopefully. I think that, if anything, today's race was almost an ad for IndyCar and how much that F1 mentioned IndyCar and having Hinchcliffe as a commentator and a lot of drivers at the track. But now let's move on to the more exciting race, in my opinion, of today and the weekend, NASCAR. So we started off with a sunny day in Kansas for the AdventHealth 400 at Kansas Speedway. And after Larson was spun out on lap 4 of the race, it looked like it would be a long day. However, he was leading in the closing stages of the race with Denny all over him, trying to pass for the win. On the last lap, Larson hits the wall, racing Denny due to Denny tapping Larson into the wall. And Denny takes his first win of 2023 and clinches a spot in the playoffs. And also received a great number of boos from the crowd while he was doing his post-race interview. So, Ben, were you at all surprised by the boos that Denny Hamlin received at the end there? And what are your thoughts on the finish?
Well, I wasn't surprised by the boos, but real quick, I do want to circle back because you reminded me of something, Amanda. I know during the driver intros, LL Cool J dropped the line "greatest spectacle of motorsports." I want to give a shout out to whoever the admin is on the IndyCar on NBC account because they left no crumbs on the table and went all in on hyping up the Indy 500 later this month. So kudos to them. And maybe they need to look at trademarking that a little bit more because I think there was an advertisement for Vegas that said like the greatest racing spectacle or something. So they really seem to be pushing it. Formula One do in terms of trying to steal that tagline. But anyway, getting back to the NASCAR finish here, I've got to say I don't think that this was an intentional wreck in the sense that Denny, had this premeditated idea that I'm going to go spin Kyle Larson into the wall and steal the win. I think this was just more a case of hard racing that got Kyle Larson up into the wall a little bit, got him out of shape, and then it was up to him to save it from there. Now I'll say this much: Denny certainly finished him off and put him into the wall, and certainly wasn't very apologetic about that. So maybe that counts for something in your book. Maybe it doesn't. I'm sure it does in the minds of Kyle Larson and Hendrick Motorsports fans. But again, I think they're very fortunate. At the same time that Kyle was able to save it and limp the car home in second place still because that if he had lost control of the car, he'd be probably down in the 20s. And I know with the whole playoff system, it doesn't mean too much by the time we get to the end of the season, but that would be a killer for him in the points there as well. So I think that I'm certainly not surprised that the fan reaction was the way it was. But at the same time, I don't think that this was something where we look at this and this is 100% on Denny Hamlin and he really shouldn't be proud of how he won this race. I think this was just a matter of hard racing, and ultimately you don't lift on the last lap. That's the culture that's been created in the sport nowadays, and that's what we saw today.
For me, I was surprised by the boos, actually. I know Denny Hamlin has a history, him and Chase Elliott, so we know the Chase Elliott fans are not the biggest fans of Denny Hamlin. We know Kyle Larson fans, they're probably bitter. But seeing how Denny Hamlin has last win, Coca-Cola 600 last year, he has a very popular podcast. Sometimes he opens his mouth, gets himself in a little bit of trouble. Then with this Denny Summer Challenge, which a lot of fans have been getting engaged, I was a bit surprised because I wasn't anticipating the boos. However, as all the points you mentioned, Ben, especially the hard racing, if you were at the track, watching it live, even on the television, it looked like Denny Hamlin had made contact putting Larson into the wall. The replay showed Larson hit the wall once, then the contact, back into the wall again. It was hard racing overall. It sort of reminded me of when Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch in Chicagoland a few years ago were racing hard. Both of them got into the wall. And Kyle Busch, after winning a hard race, was being booed. And he said, if you don't like that kind of racing, you don't belong here. I think it was just more circumstances of, they were hard racing. We know Denny Hamlin is not exactly the most popular driver in the garage area. Maybe that was part of the boos, but overall, I thought it was good hard racing.
This, if I could just come in real quickly, this is going to be very low tech because I don't have time to, format it into a picture here and upload it. But I just got sent this tweet from Caitlin Larson, who says actions hypocritical. So that tells you how the Larson family feels about what went down in the last lap. So between that and the fight that I think we're about to talk about with Gragson Chastain, I think maybe NASCAR is going to have some more marketing material for the next week, to say the least.
Sure, it's interesting to see that tweet because immediately after the race, and this is probably before he had seen the footage of the incident, but Larson was talking about, like you said, Joe, the finish being nothing but hard racing. And on the other hand, the camera cuts away to Chastain punching Noah Gragson. And Gragson was upset about getting squeezed by Chastain when he was exiting turn 4. He grabbed hold of Chastain post-race while discussing the incident, and Chastain ended up throwing the first punch, and the both of them were restrained before any other punches could land. So, question for you, Joe. Was Gregson's anger justified, and is he just another example of a driver that has been quote-unquote chastained?
I wouldn't call it he was Chastain, even though it just seems quite often Ross Chastain, when these incidents happen, he happens to be there. This seems like hard racing, but Gragson, He's been struggling this year. At the beginning of the season, I believe in the Daytona 500 pre-race show, we talked about how him versus Ty Gibbs for Rookie of the Year, those two battle for the championship in the Xfinity Series. This could be a very entertaining rookie battle. It has not gone his way. Ty Gibbs is running away, getting better finishes. Noah Gragson much further lower in the points. This has to be really frustrating to have what was a good race going, then get put into the wall. On top of that, I don't think it's. I know he's in the past rocked the mullet before, but now sporting the bowl haircut, I just don't think he's enjoying this year. Yes, we know the rookie season is always going to be a struggle. I think he's more of a struggle than he anticipated, so I can understand why he's frustrated. It's not going that great at all. But Ross Chastain, some folks have probably seen the video on Twitter. He told him, stop, stop. But when it looked like it was not going to stop and escalate, Chastain made the first punch. It's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen the rest of the week.
Yeah, and I love Denny's reaction too when Bob Bacros was showing him the fight in the media center. But I don't know. I feel like, with Gragson in particular, some people might think this is the case of the pot calling the kettle black here because of, the incident that Gragson had at Road America last year and a couple other times in his young career. He's been known to be aggressive and, take things too far at times. But, at the same time, Ross Chastain, I think, when he was working his way up through the ranks in trucks and Xfinity, he had a very humble origin story and, was able to bounce back from a bad sponsorship deal. And, it's kind of been this rags to riches, story with him now being in Cup and being a championship contender last year and, again, this year as well. But it does seem like every single week here we're talking on this show about some driver getting into a run-in with Ross Chastain, whether it's his fault or not, whether it's, blatant enough or not. This, again, to me looks more like it was a situation of hard racing more than anything else. But I think, everybody, it's kind of a meme at this point. Everybody's seen the memes of Twitter. Everybody blaming Ross Chastain for every incident that's ever happened in the history of mankind. So I think we're kind of hypersensitive to, incidents involving Ross Chastain right now. And maybe that, puts some implicit bias, maybe even unknowingly in terms of how we're viewing these incidents. But, I think that, again, like I said, with the, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson finish, I think that at the bare minimum, NASCAR is going to have some marketing material that we're going to see in some promos for the next couple of years as we continue to come back to Kansas.
Yeah, the reputation that Chastain seems to have been assigned or developed certainly doesn't help in incidents like these. But switching gears a little bit to talk 2311, they came in looking to make it a three-peat at Kansas, but ended up leaving with 2 top 10 finishes. Bubba was leading the race late in the second stage, but a caution on the caution led most drivers into the pits and was never in contention for the lead again, with stage 2 ending under another caution. So looking back, could they have stayed out to make it a stage win, or was this a situation where they were sort of caught in a no-win situation?
Well, you'll have to forgive me because my attention was split 3 ways between NASCAR Formula One and my Philadelphia 76ers taking on the Boston Celtics. So I was trying to monitor everything going on at the same time. But I believe most of the drivers that stayed out in stage 2, I think Joey Logano won the second stage. Is that correct? So, when we look at all those drivers and, where they finished relative in the race results, I don't know if staying out would have done Bubba Wallace any favors there. I suppose it would have gotten him, some more championship points and a playoff point for winning the stage. But I think the race strategy was probably, the right one, the one that they elected to go down, and they ended up getting a top 5 out of it as well, if I believe, if that's correct. So, I think that, you can second guess all you want, but I don't think, going from a stage win in stage 2, I think long term, as Darrell Waltrip used to say, I think that would have been a short-term game, long-term loss. They probably played their cards right today.
I would have to agree with you. When they saw that caution came out, they were thinking, we got to position ourselves to win the race, not the stage. They did that, and I feel if they had stayed out, tried to get the stage points, maybe the top 4, maybe the 5 would have also stayed out, and then you had everyone coming in pit, especially further back. In this case, I just feel it was just something where that's a decision they made. They can't second guess themselves because no matter what was going to happen, whether it stayed out or stayed in the back, the race, the way it panned out, I just don't see how they were going to get any valuable position except if they got the stage point. Of course, we know that's a playoff point as well. That would have been nice going in, but I don't see them position themselves for the win. They try to position themselves for the win because we know the win, you're in the playoffs. They won this track. It just didn't work out for them. Just tough break and just part of racing, as we know, when it comes to NASCAR, is so unpredictable that these kind of things do happen.
Joe, if you don't mind, can I just follow up real quick? One more thing is I pulled the stage 2 results up here. Joey Logano won the stage, ended up coming home in 6th place. Then you see Michael McDowell. Michael McDowell came home in 26th. Noah Gragson, obviously way down in 29th. Of course, he had the battle with Chastain that put him further back. Eric Jones, the second legacy car up there, ended up 21st. AJ Allmendinger ended up 14th. Chris Buescher ended up 17th. And that was your top 6 in the stage. And we can keep going as well. Austin Dillon was able to get a top 10 out of it, but you had Ty Dillon up there, 8th place. He ended up 22nd, and then you had Larson and Hamlin who ended up battling for the win. So everybody ahead of Larson and Hamlin in that stage. Most of them, for the most part, aside from Logano finishing up in 6th and Dillon up in the top 10 as well, they all finished much further down the field. So I don't think, if again, you can second guess all you want and say, we didn't win this way. Maybe we would have had a shot, if we tried something else, but I don't think it would have worked out that way for Bubba Wallace or for anybody else.
Got it. Yeah, and then we have a question in the chat from Alex for the both of you. Do you think either driver, going back to the Noah Gragson, Ross Chastain incident, should be penalized for this? Also, what is your take from the Chase Elliott and the other drivers told me to go deck him from Gragson?
I don't think anybody's going to be penalized, to be honest with you. I don't think that there was anything that egregious that was involved in this. And honestly, I'm not even going to touch the Chase Elliott comment because I only saw that in passing. I don't know what the context of that was, so I don't feel comfortable, commenting on, what Gragson was referring to there. But I don't know, maybe Joe, if you caught that, maybe you can back me up there.
I didn't catch it either. That's new to me as well. About supposedly if Chase Elliott and the other drivers told me to deck him, I wouldn't be. Of course, this is speculative, but knowing what's been going on with Ross Chastain lately, I wouldn't be exactly surprised. But it'll be really interesting if we get more official word. And then if maybe at that point, because one of the big things, I feel this reminds me of Ernie Irvan back in the early 90s. He was spinning people around, racing really hard, but we had a different culture in the garage of Richard Petty, Dale Earnhardt, longtime veterans. Consistencies won you championship then. Now it's different. It's a totally different NASCAR, totally different attitude. As Kyle Busch said, lack of respect here. I just think NASCAR is not going to do any fines. They're going to be using this material for watch the Coca-Cola 600, watch this race, and there's going to be a clip of it. The All-Star race, there's going to be a clip of it as well. I don't see the penalties coming, but if Chase Elliott and other drivers are talking about it, I think this might be more of an issue for Ross Chastain, knowing that he has a lot of folks not happy with him.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I only saw that quote in passing, through Twitter, so I don't know which interview he said that in or what the deal was there. But again, I think Joe, you mentioned, everybody's kind of out for Ross Chastain right now. I'm sure that's probably got something to do with it.
Yeah, he's definitely not a popular guy right now. So back to the race. Early on, 6 Toyotas, and this was about when I tuned in from watching F1, were in the top 10. The Trackhouse Chevys and Byron with Hendrick and Michael McDowell, as well as the one lone. Michael McDowell was the lone Ford. But playing changed soon after, with, like we mentioned, Logano taking stage 2, Bell, Busch, and Ty Gibbs all crashing out, and a hot, slick track today. 11 cautions total, and most of them for drivers that were struggling with handling exiting the corners. More lead changes in today's 400-mile race than any other 400-mile race on a mile-and-a-half oval, with 37 total lead changes. So Kansas was the second mile-and-a-half oval over this year. Were you guys surprised by how much handling was such an issue today?
I was a bit surprised with handling being an issue just because this is the second time with this track and this car, third time, 2 races last year, of course. And overall, I felt we were going to see a little bit more tame race like we did in Las Vegas. I don't know if it was the temperature, it was a hotter track. When it's hotter, it's more slick. So handling became more of an issue. I think as well, too, when it comes to this car, we know the mile and a half, they seem to have some of the better racing compared to the short tracks with this package. So overall, I would say I was a surprise seeing how this race turned out, but then thinking more about it, was just like, well, this is only the second mile and a half oval. We're going to have a lot more. I think the Coca-Cola 600 will be a true indicator of how the teams are getting used to this car in the mile and a half ovals.
Yeah, I've got to confess, the science of the sport sometimes isn't my strong suit. So, I'm not sure, how the temperature, would have played a role into getting a different race this year than we got last year with this new next gen car. So I'm not going to, comment too much further than what Joe said, other than, that something probably had to play a role in that as well. And, we certainly ended up getting our money's worth today. There was certainly no shortage of action. I think Clint Boyer was saying in the booth, I can't remember, having this much carnage at a mile and a half before. And I was thinking, did you not watch the Texas fall race last year? Because, that, certainly led to a lot of carnage and incidents, in that race. But I think from a quality standpoint, certainly a much better race today. And I think we should be grateful for the great show that the drivers put on today, because it was a good one.
Yeah, definitely a great show, with Kyle Larson out front leading the most laps, and second most going to Martin Truex Jr., who did a great job today. 22 cars were able to finish on the lead lap, and the 3 cars that we mentioned getting out of the race, 2 of them being JGR Toyotas. Kansas is a playoff race later in the year, and the middle race in round 16. Last year, Tyler Reddick crashed out early and, in fact, finished both Kansas races outside of the top 20. Today, his second top 10 finish at Kansas, and his last one was in this race in 2021. So, looking forward, could Tyler Reddick leave Kansas feeling better, considering that this is a track he has struggled with, and is at a team that could win? Is this a team that could win here during the playoffs?
Yeah, I think Tyler Reddick's going to have more than, just Dakota win on his resume by the time this season's said and done. He's with a team that is continuing to improve in 23-11. I think Kansas, we can officially say now is certainly one of their best tracks, with, the runs that both he and Bubba Wallace had today, and obviously sweeping last year in the 45 car with Kurt Busch winning in the spring and Bubba Wallace winning in the fall. So I think that, he's got to be feeling confident, at this point of the season with the team that he has and the runs that they've put together. I think they're thinking big picture and big things, when it comes time for the playoffs later this year.
Big picture, playoffs. It was in that first round where Tyler Reddick didn't have a good run here, had a lousy first round, was done. He doesn't want that to happen with this team. Valuable notes from today's race to be better in Kansas in the playoffs when it's the middle race for that round of 16. I think this is just going to be a huge boost of confidence when they come to the playoffs. So it doesn't matter what happens at Darlington, the Southern 500, which is going to kick out the playoffs. They know this is a track they're going to be good at. They ran pretty well today. Things could have gone better, but this is the first time for Tyler Reddick and that team to work together at this track. I think they're going to be really putting this as a race they're going to be circling. Can't wait for in the playoffs, because they could easily be a winning and going to the next round of playoffs afterwards.
Got it, yeah. And then we have another question in the chat here from Adam. He's wanting to know your take on F1 and NASCAR airing at the same time today.
I don't like it. I don't know which series I would, be shouting noon at. I guess, probably F1, because, or maybe even 1 p.m. because even then, with F1 races rarely taking longer than 2 hours, they still would have been done by the time NASCAR got started. But yeah, I don't know. I know that everybody likes to pit F1 fans and NASCAR fans against each other and say that, there's not as much overlap as you think, but there certainly is some overlap. There's overlap with all 3 of us, and there's overlap with a lot of people that, love 4 tires and steering wheel that goes fast no matter what it looks like. I think that they would be much better suited, if they found a way to try to work together a little bit and, make sure that they're not going directly head to head against one another. Of course, they could have run Kansas, last night and ARCA and trucks Friday night, I suppose. The tracks got lights. That would have alleviated it. We probably would have gotten a different kind of race because the track temperature would have been much cooler, obviously. But Formula One could have started a couple hours earlier. I know they've got a worldwide audience to think about with the time zones, but I don't know. I just think in a perfect world we would not be seeing this head-to-head direct clash. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see the ratings come in. Again, I think NASCAR is going to blow F1 out of the water in terms of total ratings, but that 1849 demo is always one to watch.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially with the ratings, the demographics. Watching the F1 race, I feel like F1, they kept the presenters, we're taking over America, we're growing America. I feel like they're really trying to bring the fight to NASCAR that we're going to put ourselves in the same time, because I feel F1 could have easily started a little earlier, so that way it was more convenient for the fans like the three of us that, okay, watch F1, change over to this other channel to watch NASCAR or NASCAR, a nighttime race. That would have been fun with the fans. We know some of the TV networks, they don't exactly want a Saturday night race. They've really dropped off the number of Saturday night races. In fact, for the Cup Series, I think this is really F1 trying to bring the battle to NASCAR to try to take the tension away. I anticipate the same thing's going to happen in Austin, Texas as well, like it has the last couple of seasons. Las Vegas, we know that's not going to happen because I think F1 race is going to be under the lights in Las Vegas. So unless for some reason NASCAR decides to move the start time,
yeah,
I don't see that being an issue, thankfully.
Yeah, that's your Saturday night F1 race right there in Las Vegas, and it's going to be early Sunday morning for us here on the East Coast. That's one that, again, I don't know what they're thinking there in terms of trying to grow the sport here in the U.S. and putting this massively hyped U.S. race on at 1 a.m. Eastern time or 1:30 Eastern time, whatever it is. I think there's a lot to consider, obviously, with the worldwide audience, but maybe the country that the race is being held in should be the priority here because we've all got to do it at some point. I remember getting up at 3 a.m. for those Malaysia Grand Prix starts, so it's a losing battle in some ways, no matter how you play it, but maybe we should be thinking about the American audience for the American races. Just an idea.
Yeah, and speaking of the American audience, I think that a lot of us, like you mentioned, Ben, are accustomed to waking up pretty early anyway. So I think that a 12 noon start time isn't too early for the US fans if F1 was to move up. I know there was also like some passing mentions of F1 potentially making Miami a night race, so that could alleviate some of the conflict, but who knows? I think that, yeah, in terms of if you want to grow your US base, maybe don't clash with NASCAR.
Yeah, well, and I'll quote my editor-in-chief over at lastcard.info, Brock Beard. I know, Joe, you're also out there on the West Coast. Brock was saying on his stream last week he would have no problem getting up at 9 a.m. To watch a NASCAR Cup race, and I know that the fans that are passionate enough, dedicated enough, I think they feel the same way in many respects. I don't know if you want to comment on that, though, since you're over in the Portland area on the West Coast as well.
Growing up, I was even in Alaska, an hour behind. So
even earlier, yep.
Even earlier there, and we would do that. It made Japan, Malaysia, it was nice because it was like Saturday night for us in Alaska. But yeah, we're true fans. We're going to get up no matter what, just like F1's banking on the idea with Las Vegas. You're going to have the West Coast. It's going to be Saturday night. They're going to be banking on their fans globally staying up for this one big race. I feel they're sort of banking on it being so late, such an unusual time. It could be that special occasion, but if they were to do this every race, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, but again, the sun sets before 10:30, right? Like, I get that you want the spectacle under the lights on the strip and everything, but I still, I mean, I know you've got a massive European audience, but again, I think that once you've got to get up at 6 or 7, set your alarm. Like, what's another hour? Like a 5 a.m. start time. I think we have to do it often enough. Enough of the races are in Europe; they can do it once a year for this Vegas race.
And one quick thing too, it's much later in the year. It's in the desert under the lights. It does get pretty cold. It's dry. It's not humid, so it'd be interesting to see how the cars, the fans, and how will it all work out.
Yeah, I was in Vegas for the F1. What did they call it? Like their showcase that when they came last year, and it was freezing, and that was in maybe November, early November, and that was midday. So this race is going to be very cold for the fans that do attend. But speaking of another series, IndyCar is spending the month of May in Indianapolis, but NASCAR is keeping it in the Carolinas with Darlington, South Carolina next weekend, and then on to North Wilkesboro for the first time since 1996, and Charlotte for the Coca-Cola 600 on Memorial Day weekend. So, as always, be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network here on YouTube as not to miss any of our previews and race recaps, and including Grid Live Encore with Ben, Brandon, and Joshua with recaps of ARCA and trucks tomorrow. So thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, and I will add, I believe we're going to try to do a little bit of an open segment at the start of a show to fill some time since we only have a couple of races to cover. So we may continue this NASCAR F1 start time spectacle debate a little bit with Josh as well, since he couldn't be on the show tonight. Again, there's a start time issue there because Josh is, over in the UK, it's, early hours of the morning. It's tough for him to make these wrap-up shows. So, he would certainly all be for noon start for NASCAR, I'm sure. But, we'll put that discussion to bed for now. Let's move on and talk about the grid ranking here. And unsurprisingly, Max Verstappen continues to lead the grid ranking. He started ninth today, went through the field to grab the win. And as you see the rest of the top 10 there, Nick Cassidy moves into the top 10 while Pascal Wehrlein drops out. Christopher Bell also dropped out of the top 10 after crashing late in the second stage. The top 4 in the grid ranking will not be racing next weekend as Formula One supercars are off, but World Rally Championship, IndyCar, and MotoGP will be racing next weekend along with NASCAR. And Joe, this is a World Rally question for you. Sebastian Ogier is not racing at Rally Portugal next weekend. Will he still be in the grid ranking this time next week?
It's going to be really interesting to see. When it comes to the grid ranking, of course, the top 5 from each series makes it into the standings. Sebastian Ogier does not have that big of a lead compared to everyone else because he doesn't race every single event. One of the big things is just so happens as Sebastian Ogier has been racing, he's been winning. Just recently over in Rally Croatia, he did not get the win. So I anticipate if we see Elfyn Evans, Calder Rovanpera, Thierry Neuville finishing up towards the front, Ogier's going to be dropping down in the grid ranking. Will he still be in it? That's going to be really hard. He'll need Autonic to also finish ahead. The big thing is if any of the favorites have bad luck, I think he'll still be there because he'll still be in the top 5. But I don't anticipate Ogier staying in the top 10 really much longer.
And we'll take a look at the rest of the grid ranking here. As we mentioned, Bell dropped a little bit down to an 11.64. You see him there in 16th, still in the top 20. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc are both outside the top 20. Mercedes and Red Bull both had nothing for Mercedes and Ferrari, both had nothing for Red Bull today at Miami. And a majority of Formula E drivers as well continue to remain ahead of most of the NASCAR Cup Series drivers. Max Verstappen has finished first or second in every race this year, surpassing Scott McLaughlin's 2019 record of most consecutive podium finishes for the Week 1 leader of the grid ranking. Of course, that was back when he was in the Supercars series. As you take another look there at the top 10 for Week 6. Now, Amanda, I know Joe and I were trying to fact check this before the show. We believe the only track ahead where Max Verstappen's yet to finish on the podium in his F1 career is Las Vegas, which of course will be a brand new race. He did retire from the Bahrain Outer Circuit race in 2020, but of course that was heavily impacted by the pandemic. It's very unlikely that we're going to be racing there again anytime soon. Is there any track where you believe Verstappen will have the greatest challenge ahead of him in keeping this podium or top 2 streak alive as we continue this season here?
Well, that stat wouldn't surprise me if true, and I believe it is. But I think that, like I mentioned before, Monaco is the one place where if other teams are able to set up their cars to just basically tune them so that they can get that one lap pace, qualify ahead of Verstappen or both Red Bulls, that could be the one race where that's really their only chance of stopping Verstappen that I see ahead. But But yeah, I think Vegas is there for the taking, and if anyone's good at learning tracks and learning them quickly, it's probably Max. So I think that Monaco might be his greatest challenge ahead in keeping his top 2 streak.
Well, as Steve Madrid would always remind us during the NBC broadcast in the years where Mercedes were so dominant, there's never been a perfect season in Formula One. McLaren came so close back in 1988. Mercedes came close in 2016, I think, with 19 of the 21 races that year. But Red Bull looked very, very strong. I've got a feeling, though, with how long the calendar is, at some point they're going to run into some sort of issue that will open the door for an Aston Martin or Mercedes to get up there. But at the moment, I think it's going to be a self-inflicted wound for Max Verstappen. That's the only thing that's going to stop him from, if not winning the race, certainly falling outside of the top 3 and finishing off the podium.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hopefully we'll get some things to be a little bit shaken up so that we can add a little bit of diversity back into the podium there. All right, now we're bringing Kobe back in, and it's time for our one shining moment of the weekend. So as always, we encourage everyone watching to share your one shining moment from the race weekend. We'll start with you, Joe. What's your one shining moment from the weekend?
My one shining moment has to be the Formula E Monaco E-Prix. That was a really great race, and Formula E, they've really been putting on great races at Monaco. We talk about Monaco being, of course, the biggest race for Formula One, but we know, as you all have been mentioning, it's the hardest race to pass on, so it's not exactly the most thrilling race. We know in the Formula One world, there's sometimes some discussion. Should Monaco even stay on the calendar? Should it continue hosting races? When it comes to Formula E, the answer is a clear yes. I think they are putting together some of the best races in Monaco we've seen in quite a long time. It's almost just as unpredictable as any other Formula E race. And Nick Cassidy to come through the field, get that win. Huge effort by that Envision team. And now he's the points leader. Monaco E-Prix, that is my one shining moment.
And my one shining moment definitely has to be the AdventHealth 400 at Kansas Speedway. That was quite a great race. All a wonderful on track product from beginning to the end, and exciting finish at the end between Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson, and the fight on pit road with Ross Chastain and Noah Gragson. This is certainly is going to go down in history as one of the classic Kansas races. And if you watch Fox Sports 1, NASCAR runs a special on there titled Greatest Races, and it wouldn't surprise me years from now if Fox Sports 1 is still around, we're going to see that race on there, because it was a really, really great event, and I thought it went as well as it could have possibly gone.
Yeah, Kobe took the words right out of my mouth. And if you watch the show, it's no secret that I've been very critical of a lot of the directions that NASCAR has been headed over the last several years in terms of the on-track product and how we crown a champion and everything. But fair is fair, and I will give a call to them today. There is no doubt, no argument in my mind that NASCAR absolutely beat F1 in terms of the value for entertainment in the on-track product today. It was a great race at Kansas, and like you mentioned, Kobe, it wouldn't surprise me if we're talking years from now about this being one of the all-time classic races at Kansas Speedway, because the track certainly put on a fantastic show today. Action right from the start all the way up to the finish, and even beyond the finish with some of the stuff going on in pit road and on Twitter that we've seen since the checker flag flew today. So a great race at Kansas, and that is my one shining moment for this weekend.
Yeah, Kansas would definitely have to be my favorite race of the weekend, but I think I'll have to give my one shining moment to Max Verstappen and his drive to the front. From starting out of position, he at least kept things interesting enough to at least give us a little bit of false hope that the podium might look a little different today, but kept things exciting with Checo sort of down to the end there. So that would have to be my one shining moment from the weekend.
And of course, this weekend we had Pick a Winner. Matthew Bro got 2 correct guesses. He moves up in the stands 5th. Edward continues to still lead. Kobe also got a point as well, too. Ben has a point. Manda as well. Overall, what a race weekend, but still it is very close. Pick a Winner stand, so I encourage everyone, if you haven't participated in Pick a Winner yet, still got plenty of time, because still nobody has gotten that bonus point for correctly guessing every race on the weekend. Next week is going to be really hard. We got five series going on, 6 races with the MotoGP Sprint. I don't know what to say besides Kobe. It just seems like I don't know how. Ed's the real deal. This isn't just some fluke. He correctly guessed Max Verstappen, of course. Matthew Bro got Cassidy. I'm just amazed with how close this pick a winner season is.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Ed's just been lucky guessing all these or he's doing his homework. It seems we know Ed's a really smart guy. I have a feeling he's doing his homework, so more power to him. Glad to have some competition continuing up to the top as we get deeper into this pick a winner championship season.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun all year long. Pick a winner, and of course, all year long, if you're going to be watching us, we highly recommend invest in us. Help us pay the bills, stay on the air, and once we hit $500 a month, we'll be at the track more frequently. We're coming up to the month of June, where we're going to be busy at the track at Portland International Raceway, our backyard. We're going to have IndyCar later on in Portland, and of course, Formula E is coming to Portland for the first time. So be sure to invest in us through Patreon or buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee. You could set the amount, how frequent you want to make the investment as well too. And as you see, some of our fine folks bought us multiple cups of coffee. We'll thank you on the air. And be sure to follow us, gridranking.com. We're going to have some articles from this race weekend. Be sure to check that out. Share with your friends and families that love motorsports. On LinkedIn, if you want to be part of the Grid Network, opportunities are posted there. And of course, follow Grid Rank on Twitter for all the latest from the Grid Ranking, the Grid Endurance Performance Index. And if you're watching us on YouTube or you're watching us on another platform, go to our YouTube channel, find Grid Network, hit the subscribe button, the bell icon. We're trying to get to our goal of 1,000 subscribers before the Indianapolis 500. Tomorrow, Grid Encore with Ben. We're going to recap Truck Series, ARCA, and some other discussions with Joshua Birch. Then Wednesday, Grid Tonight, weekly motorsports news program with Kobe, Grid Endurance Performance Index update with Matt White. And of course, Friday, Women in Motorsports, we're going to recap the F1 Academy race weekend, Tony Beringer's debut race, and much more. And then we'll do it all over again next Saturday, right here on Grid Live pre-race. For Amanda, Ben, Kobe, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.